disclosure, a couple of things are happening simultaneously for me right now. One is I am trying to remember what it's like to preach an entire sermon standing up. See what I did there? Okay. It's okay. You missed it. And then the other thing is I've got a little bit of a senior spring vibe happening right now. So it's taking everything in me not to like go over and just get the stool and sit down and be like, let's just talk, guys. If I do that midway through, everybody's just going to say okay, right? Thank you. You going to play the guitar like I'm Emma? No. All right. So I want to talk to you guys today about something that's kind of hard. It's a little bit embarrassing for me. And I'm going to share it with you because you're my family. You guys are thinking to yourselves, hey, why hasn't Catrina got a headset on? Turns out our headset isn't working, so this is a quick ploy for if you'd be interested in investing in the Pastoral Preaching Headset Fund. As you can see, it's needed. All right. So I'm going to share with you guys a story, and I kind of threw my sister under the bus for a children's story because I knew I was going to tell this story. It's a hard thing for me to talk about. I was in 5th grade. And don't look at me. I was lying on the floor of the bathroom, trying as best I could to keep everything inside of my body. I felt the pain throbbing in my head and the great war happening in my belly. And I thought to myself, if you can just keep everything down, you'll be okay. And as I lay there, my babysitter came in with my mom's #1 remedy for nausea: ice water. I pulled myself up off of the floor and took a sip. And just like that, everything inside of me from what felt like the beginning of my life came pouring out into the toilet. And the shame was real. I barely made it back to my bed, where I laid down, questioning everything that I knew to be true in the world. Things like, it goes in one way and comes out another. Things like, if you just put your mind to it, you won't get sick. True story. Whenever I felt sick, I would just stop being sick and be awesome instead. And here I was, laying in my bed, having thrown up in front of Auntie, who seemed perfectly fine with this, by the way. I lay there with that disgusting taste in my mouth, and I closed my eyes, retreating from the nightmare, and found sleep in minutes. Now, I would like to tell you that this is the last time that ever happened to me. It is not. It is not. You see, over the course of almost a decade, time after time, I would feel sick, and time after time, I would turn to my mother for help, and time after time, she would prescribe the very same remedy, until it was the fall of my senior year in high school that I lay on the floor in the dorm hallway on the phone with my mom praying for death, and she said, honey, just go get some ice water. And I said, I don't want to, I'll just throw up. To which she said in a calm voice that she thought was more reassuring than it actually was, exactly, and then you'll feel better. I know I'm not the only one who faces this kind of battle. It seems like day after day I find myself in a power struggle of some kind. Sometimes it's an internal struggle as I try to navigate whether or not to hang out with my friends at the end of a very long day or a very long week. Sometimes it's an external struggle as I argue with my neighbor about where they park their car, because directly behind my garage door is not an acceptable answer, no matter how limited the parking spaces are. Sometimes it's a battle with God, because he insists that his way is perfect, and I counter with my way is mine. It feels like life is filled with these no-win situations, so how do we handle it? How did Jacob handle it? I'm going to read the story for you guys again that I'm going to look at. It says, that night, Jacob got up. Sorry, guys, somebody just got registered for next week's service, and I got a notice on my... It says, that night, Jacob got up. Thanks. And took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And after he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he could not win, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched. And as he wrestled with the man, here's my problem, he didn't let go. Then the man said, let me go, for it's daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And the man asked, what is your name? Jacob answered, he answered, and the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? And then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. We each wrestle with problems like Jacob. We find ourselves at odds with our family, with God, even with ourselves. And like Jacob, when faced with challenges, we kick into fight, flight, or freeze. The last time Jacob heard his brother was looking for him, he ran. Like to a different country. Entirely. Not to the house next door. Several days' journey away. Too many times we have found ourselves in that place. And sometimes the truth is, we find ourselves in that place where we're running away because the truth is, we don't know how to face what's going on. And yes, it's true that sometimes we run away by physically running away, but sometimes we run away by simply building up walls. Nobody needs to know what's in my heart. Nobody needs to know my hopes and dreams. Nobody needs to know my fears, my journey. Nobody needs to know, because what happens when they know is not always great. In fact, Jacob had this experience in Genesis chapter 29. In Genesis chapter 29, he experienced what it felt like to be exploited. He ran into Paddan Aram, and there he met Laban, his uncle. He spent a month there, and then in verse 15 it says, Laban said to him, you shouldn't work for me without pay just because we're relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be. Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah. The younger one was Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes. That's a really nice way of saying he was not interested. But Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife. He exposed his truth. He exposed the truth of his heart, that deep desire within him, and Laban agreed. He says, I'd rather give her to you than to anyone else. Stay and work with me. So Jacob worked 7 years to pay for Rachel, but his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. And finally the time came for him to marry her. I have fulfilled my agreement, Jacob said to Laban. Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her. So Laban invited everyone in and prepared a wedding feast, and that night sent a daughter. Maybe it was a name tag mix-up. You know, my sister and I look alike. Maybe it was one of those times where he was like, yeah, you, that's the right one, right? So he sends Leah, and then in the morning when Jacob is outraged by this, he says, well, here's the problem. It is not our custom here to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn. Really, for 7 years, that hasn't been your custom, and this is the first time it came up. He says, so here's the deal. I'm going to give you a 2-for-1, kind of, because you actually have to pay for both. He says, I will wait until the bridal week is over, and then we'll give you Rachel too. Yay! As long as you work another 7 years. So I went to the store, and I bought the most amazing peaches. And I was so excited about these. I picked out exactly which peaches, because, you know, you can't get the wrong ones. Some of them are like rocks. I don't want a rock. I want a peach. Go to the store, you get them, you put them all. Your mouth is watering. You get home. They have traded out the beautiful peaches for these weird things that we're going to call peaches, because, sure, they came from the same tree, with no flavor and mostly just a pit. You go back to the store and say, hey, these are not the peaches I picked. And they say, it's cool. We'll go ahead and give you the peaches you picked as long as you pay us again. I told you what I wanted. I paid for what I wanted. Now I have to pay you again for what I don't want? It doesn't work that way. But Jacob learned his lesson from this and didn't bother telling Laban what he wanted anymore. He said, you have demonstrated to me that I can't be vulnerable with you, and therefore I will not be vulnerable with you. When we come up with some different wages, I will come up with a way to make those wages work. When I decide to move home, I will forget to mention that to you. Because once that trust is broken, it's very hard to just be like, oops. And how many times do we make that expectation for ourselves? That trust gets broken. We find ourselves with that secret that we told our best friend. Girls, especially middle school girls, are really going to understand what I'm saying right now. And she turned on us, told the whole school, and now that boy that I have a crush on is looking at me every day like, ew. Don't worry. When you get older, they still do that. And you have to decide, am I ever going to tell people what I want? Am I ever going to tell people how I feel again? You're honest about the call that God places on your life. You go and you say, I feel like God is calling me to start this ministry. And you're vulnerable in a deep and personal and real way. And then the board is like, with what money and what people and what now? Cannot believe you came in here. And then you don't want to tell anybody about your calling anymore because everybody has questions about it. And we do that so often where we expose ourselves to the wrong people and they don't respond. And so then we shut ourselves off from everyone. Because Jacob didn't just shut out Laban. Jacob created an environment in his home where manipulation was how you get what you want. He had done this, let's be real, Jacob kind of had a thing where manipulation was his MO. And he doubled down after this. He was like, you know what, I don't have to do this. My kids are going to be manipulative. My wives are going to be, instead of saying, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to be honest. Guys, Rachel, Leah, it didn't work out. I'm sorry, but we're all going to sit down and figure out how to be a family now. No. Let's trade food for our husband. And we shut everyone out and manipulate everyone and fall into really bad habits like gossiping and backbiting so that nobody sees what's going on with us. We worry about being honest in our church, with our church family, about our struggles, because instead of hearing, I'm struggling with this sin, what they're going to hear is, I am no longer qualified to be a Christian. And we wear these masks. And Jacob found himself having been exploited often enough that he built a wall, not a physical wall, but an emotional wall around himself. So it says that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions, and then he was left alone. Then he was vulnerable. Then he was in a place with no defense, no people around him, just him. And it's interesting because it says that he fought with this man, that he wrestled with him until daybreak. But I wonder if God showed up to wrestle. It's clear from the text that Jacob was on edge. That's a good way of describing what he was. He was pretty certain that he was going to die soon. He felt like not only was his life in danger, but the life of his children, the life of his servants, everything that he had worked for was up in the air on this night. And I don't know if you guys are anything like me, but I'll be honest with you, it gets to a point where I'm on edge enough that if you come up behind me quietly enough and you tap me on the shoulder, not because I don't love you, but that instinct kicks in, and my response to you, rather than being like, hi, is, oh. And you get to that point where you're trying to survive, and so I wonder if God didn't actually bother coming so that he could wrestle, because it says that, in the verse, it says that God saw that he couldn't win, which is a really interesting phraseology. That God was like, oh no, this old man is too strong for me to fight for the night. Instead, the idea is that God saw that he was not going to be successful in what he was attempting to do, which was simply be with Jacob. He said, okay, dude, I'm not fighting you. Have you ever seen those little cartoons where the big giant has his hand out and the tiny little kid is like swinging? And the giant's just like, so what do you guys do today? That's honestly what I see. Like, he's sitting here like, Jacob, dude, what are you doing? Nope. Sarah, calm down. Why? Why are you doing this? Jacob. And then, because he was kind of, over it, we did this all night, and Jacob still didn't, look up and be like, oh, what's up, God? How you doing? He was like, dink. Come on, guys. You're telling me God didn't win the wrestling match, but he could go, dink. Not like, boom, no uppercuts, no kicks, no, just dink. Knock his whole body off. God was like, I'm really not trying to fight you. All I wanted, you were here, you were vulnerable. I've shown up when you were vulnerable before. I've shown up in your hurt before. Remember, Bethel, remember how you were laying there asleep, stressed out because your brother was going to kill you, and I showed up? I've done this before, Jacob. You know how this goes. And yet, you are so on edge and so stressed out that you can't even let me in. And now we're fighting when we're on the same team. But that instinct wouldn't turn off. And Jacob instead found himself still wrestling, hurting, just holding on anyway. Because he couldn't expose his weakness. He couldn't admit that he was vulnerable. God says, hey, can we stop doing this because the sun's coming up? And Jacob fights for what he thinks God is refusing of him. He says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And I'm kind of proud of God for not being like, dude, what do you think seriously, now I'm not going to bless you just because you're being weird about it. Like, we went through this the entire night. Why do you think I came here? I came here to bless you. I came here to work with you. I came here to walk with you. And now, all of a sudden, you think this was your idea. But he didn't, because he's God and he's awesome. Instead, he said, all right, then let's do that. Sure, that's a great idea. And he blesses him, and that blessing changes his life. Job describes it after he has his exchange, which was quite traumatic and not just one night. And God came and had this conversation with him in which, if anybody was going to be, on the opposite side, this conversation made it perfectly clear that Job had no idea what he was talking about and had no right to question God at all. And Job's response in Job 42, verse 5, is to say, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. That moment, that experience, that conversation, that wrestling resulted in a change for him, a change that led to intimacy. Because when we choose to be vulnerable, when we choose to say, hey, this is that deep hurt within me, and it's received and accepted and loved, the natural response is intimacy. So what happens when we stop wrestling with God? When we are truly open to God, he heals those hurt parts. He helps us to be open with others. God changed Jacob's heart. He stopped pushing his family away. He started his journey home with a new approach and was able to reconcile with his brother. He was able to be there with his father. Jacob's relationship with God changed after that day. Yes, he was constantly reminded of the consequences of bad habits. But he was also reminded of a God who sees him through everything. And step by step in his life, he builds altar after altar to the God who he saw face to face. You gain a lot when you're vulnerable with God. And yet, he doesn't ask us to wait until the whole world is falling apart, and we're pretty certain that it's the end of days, so not 2020, before, he's like, hey, let's be intimate. Let's have that moment. He's like, hey, you woke up today. Let's have that moment. And can I be honest with you? I don't know about you. This may be a weird Catrina thing, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway, because I feel like if I can't be vulnerable with you, I can't expect you guys to be vulnerable. There are times when I wake up in the morning, and it's not a matter of I'm honestly as busy as I make myself out to be, and that's why I just didn't have time to have devotions that day. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and think, God, I feel like things are really falling apart right now. I feel like I bared my soul to you and told you what I wanted, and I shared with you how afraid I was, and I shared with you my hopes and my dreams, and you seem to be very entertained by the fact that none of that is happening right now. You seem to be okay with me being in a nightmare right now, and so I don't want to be vulnerable with you right now. And here's the amazing thing, because I know some of you are there right now, probably not anybody in the room, but probably some random person online that's never been to our church, sure, who's like, ooh, did she seriously just say sometimes she just doesn't talk to God in the morning and she's a pastor? Like, yeah, that happens, guys. Pastors get discouraged and tired and frustrated and lonely. And the amazing thing is that God's response isn't, well, you didn't want to talk to me yesterday, so I guess that's it. When I come back the next day and I'm like, okay, that was a terrible idea. Why would you literally let me do that? He's like, I mean, because I love you and I want you to do it. I want you to be here. I want you to be with me. I want you to have that intimacy because you want it, not because you feel like, well, he already knows everything, so I guess I'll just bear my burden. And he takes my wrestling with him and he changes it so that the next time I say, I don't know that I want to do that because I'm so stressed out and I'm so tired and God doesn't seem to be answering my prayers, he says, okay, but remember how I was with you the last time you went through this, and maybe you could just spend some time talking to me and sharing with me that it's hard? And then, no, I'm not going to just suddenly give you $1 million so that you can buy more shoes. I'm going to walk with you and care about you and totally agree that what they said to you was so wrong. Girl, you are so right. She does not need to talk to you like that, boo. But also, no, you can't say that back. Keep it in your head. And instead of having this war with God, I get to walk with God, because that's what he's looking for. The story is told in Mark chapter 10 of a man named Bartimaeus. He sat outside of Jericho begging, and when he heard that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. He laid himself entirely out, and the crowd's response was, that is not acceptable. And he had a choice to make. He could have rebuilt that wall and said, nobody needs to know how big of a struggle it is for me to be blind. Keep it to yourself, B. But instead he said, no. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. The crowd rejected him, and Jesus saw him. The woman with the issue of blood tried to blend into the crowd. She didn't want anybody knowing her story. She didn't want anybody hearing her struggle. She just wanted to blend in and not be seen and be blessed and go home. And Jesus said, no, I insist that you be seen. Because God isn't just here to fix stuff. God is here to see us. God is here to know us. God is here to connect with us on a personal and real level. So, how much faith do you have? What are you willing to risk? What would your walk with God look like if you chose to be vulnerable with him? What would our families look like if our homes were safe places to really be ourselves? What would our church look like if we as a church were a safe place to let our guard down? I want to invite you, as we are reflecting on all of the changes that have happened over the course of the year or so, and all of the things that are to come, to take steps to be vulnerable first and foremost with God, to have that time. And sometimes it's literally, God, I'm broken and tired and I don't know anything else to say to you. I don't have a cute prayer. I don't have some Bible verse that I've been inspired by lately. Right now, God, I just need you to minister to me. What an incredible idea if worship was about allowing God to minister to us. And as we are transformed individually by that personal relationship with God, our families start to look like places where it's okay that we fail, where grace abounds much more than our failures abound, where we can share even the craziest of dreams and experience love and acceptance. And when that's what you're living with, when that's what you're walking with, and you come to church, you find yourself in a place where your church family doesn't have to be perfect to be loved. Where we're not worried that maybe Catrina threw one fit and now she wants to leave our church. We get that families fight and cry and stomp off to our rooms and then come back and have dinner. And if it's tacos, we get that life is hard for everybody. And because God is intimately aware of what we're going through, and we are intimately aware of the grace we receive, we are able and willing to give that grace to the people that are around us. I want to invite you guys not to think about this as a way of changing our church. I know a lot of times, I'm going to talk for a second, hang in there, I'm almost done. I know a lot of times we talk about like vision casting and the importance and the power of having this united vision, and I'm not trying to sidestep it. I love strategic planning. I genuinely believe that as we are united in our vision, we can accomplish incredible things. But here's the thing. If I speak with the tongue of men and of angels, but have not love. Love isn't something I develop. Everything in me is a mess. Sin has ruined all of us. Not all of you, all of us. We don't have it. And so what happens when we connect with a God that is 100% just love is that he gives it to us. Before we need a shared vision, we need a shared love. Before we need an evangelistic plan, we need a love. Before we need anything else in our church, we need love. And that love can't start here, guys. That love cannot start here. That love starts here. That love starts with me being like, God, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I don't want to go to staff meeting. Why would you let him schedule it before 10 a.m.? And having a God that says, honey, let's just go get a Starbucks and relax. Because you're still awesome and you need to stop stressing about this staff meeting. You've been to staff meetings before. I've gone with you to staff meetings before. Stop being a weirdo in the most loving way possible. And then you walk in not with, I'm already 30 minutes off my life. Instead, you walk in with, that's cool. If I'm tired, I'm tired. I'm still loved and accepted. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Still loved and accepted. If I am absolutely the most amazing youth pastor in the history of forever, not if, guys, not if. Just you wait. Just you wait. I am still loved and accepted. And that love is what transforms us. When we open it up and God is like, ooh, that's a fun thing you've got there in your heart. And instead of saying, can you please close that back up so I don't have to see it, he says, it's okay. Shh. You're good. And heals that. All of that anger, all of that pain, all of that stuff that we've been carrying around because when we were 2 years old, our mom gave us the wrong binky, goes away. Because God's like, I got you. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to do. I know it's not a big hoopla hurrah call, but it's the one I'm making today, is to be intimately vulnerable with God. Let's pray. God, we are so grateful that you see us and you know us and you love us. And we know that you have demonstrated in your Son just how dirty you're willing to get your hands to connect with us. And so I pray that you would help us to open our hearts to you anew. Not maybe for the first time, but God, once again, all over again, like it was the first time. To allow you into the dark places, to scary places, to the parts we don't want anybody else to see, and allow you to touch and to heal and to work. God, we are so excited for what you're about to do in our church. We have seen you working in the last year and a half, and we know that even better is yet to come, and we cannot wait to see what you're going to do with us. But God, we know that you're partnering with imperfect people. And so what we're asking before you do a work in our church is that you would do a work in each of us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Amen.